Good afternoon. My name is Nelson C. Garais, School of Health Science, and my presentation today is Dangers in the Kitchen. And let's go to our introduction slide. According to OSHA and workers' compensation data from 2015, cuts, lacerations, and punctures were at 22%, number one thing. Right behind it, slips, trips, and falls at 20%. Sprains and strains and soft tissue injuries, which are also related to slips, trips, and falls, at 15%. Burns and scalds, 13%. And yes, we will be talking about safety today, but also another consideration is also documentation and potential litigation in the form of workers' compensation claims and potential legality. There is an average of four incidents that are reported to workers' compensation per restaurant. Average cost per restaurant per year, 2015 data, is $45,600 per restaurant. An average loss of time can be up to and over a year. So it is not only something to consider, of course, and a primary consideration is safety, but the secondary consideration is also you also make it safe, but we also have to consider damages to your workplace as well, because many of you are currently managers and owners of your own workplace, and there's also quite a few of you who are going to be potential owners. So these are also things to also consider. Now, prevention of cuts, the proper equipment and the proper protocols, which you probably have already went over in other courses, using proper equipment, cutting food away from your body, what to do and how to react when a knife falls. Don't use the proper tool for the proper job. Never use a knife to open cans or pry lids, and wash and store knives and other sharp objects. Now, a lot of this prevention is commonsensical. But we all know when we're working and we're in the heat of things, and the kitchen can get pretty hot in more than one way. You always have to be thinking. And I'm from the medical world, and it's the same thing. It's very stressful. It is fast-paced. You're doing long hours and you're tired. A lot of the common sense stuff might go away. It goes upon stress and upon time constraints. But always have in the back of your mind prevention and safety and proper equipment and proper protocols. And what happens if you have glass? Of course, take care of it. Wipe the area down, right? Place broken glass and damp paper towels in a paper bag. It goes in the proper trash containers. Again, a lot of commonsensical stuff, but you guys know in the heat of battle, what happens? A lot of common sense tends to take a back seat to expediency and speed, which shouldn't be the case. Use your cookware safely. Turn the handles of the cookware inward on the range so they don't stick out. Use dry pot holders when handling pans. Open lids like a shield away from your body to avoid steam burns. Pull out the oven rack first when removing hot cookware from the oven. And heating elements on electric ranges remain hot. It takes a while, especially it goes on metal objects, for heat to dissipate. So you don't know how long that thing's been sitting there. So you have to always check and assume that it is hot. Back to using equipment safely. This is also another thing in healthcare where did you actually pay attention during your orientation and know exactly the manufacturer's recommendations on how to use all the equipment that goes in your kitchen. And the same thing also goes for all the stuff that's in the hospital or in the clinics. And it's the same kind of idea. Okay. Fire. You guys have oil. Make sure it's stored properly. Make sure you're wearing appropriate clothing. Your hair also appropriately tied back. towels, potholes, paper towels, anything flammable away from any source of heat or flame. Clean up grease buildup, right? Or make sure things are cleaned regularly. Again, back to Department of Health standards and OSHA standards as well, which you probably are all already familiar with. Avoid leaving the kitchen. And again, back to OSHA and safety regulations, make sure all your fire prevention protocols, like a smoke detector and all that other stuff, are also in play. Okay. Now, you should have already the kind of fire extinguisher that does all of the above, right? And we're not going to go into greater detail. And again, it is best to do what? The protocols that we were talking about earlier, right, will prevent, and also thinking on your feet is the greater prevention. But if there is a fire, you can put out small pan fires using a larger lid to smother the flame, grease fires, baking soda, clothing fires, of course, that classic, we all were in school stop, drop, and roll. And it's very easy to panic if you do not have a plan in place, or if you don't have your preventive measures and protocols in place. And of course, fire extinguishers. We're not going to go into greater detail of that. There are specific types of fire extinguishers that puts out all of the above. And they're also required by OSHA, Occupation Safety and Hazard Administration, again, for your kitchen to be compliant. Okay, what happened? Let us. Anything burns, we went through that. Do that. Do that. Okay. Now we're cooking. Pun intended. Electrocution. It is also, there's a lot of electrical appliances in the kitchen, right? Again, back to, do you know how to use your equipment? Are you using the equipment in its proper manner? Make sure electrical appliances are just unplugged. You grab the plug, the actual base of it, and not the cord. Keep cords away from heat sources. Dry hands completely before operating electrical appliances, and keep electrical appliances away from water. And again, a lot of commonsensical things, but in the heat of battle, tends to step aside. Same thing with avoiding falls, bumps, and bruises. We have like I don't know about the kitchen, but I'm sure they have rules against running around in the kitchen. We have similar rules in the hospital, in the ward. And if you've ever seen a good emergency room, no one is running. No one's even moving considerably fast. Because remember, you want to move smooth, not fast. Because if you move fast, you tend to miss things. You might not see a spill. You might not see your colleague or your partner. You might not see a cupboard door or drawer that was left open or loose, or other things that are in your way, like tables, chairs, and especially other people. So again, back to mindset that we were talking about earlier. Kind of have your head on a swivel, and move briskly, but not too quickly. That is the call for the day, especially for fall prevention. Another thing I failed to mention as well regarding fall prevention is properly communicate to your colleagues, and tell them and make sure they know, I'm planning to go down this route. Hey, watch your back, right? And we all all of us who are in a realm of with some modicum of danger, these are things that will help prevent us from hurting ourselves and our colleagues. Poisoning, now not as common, it wasn't mentioned, but OSHA mentioned it, so I'm going to mention it here for completion as well. Drain cleaners, household cleaners, and other products. One of the other things that you probably do in the kitchen is, of course, you clean it. And there are all these products and all these other chemicals that are, they're good for the counter, but not really good for inhalation, not really good for your eyes or your skin. So just like your equipment, don't take cleaning for granted. Know your products, know how they are to be used. Keep it, reach out of, well, children, pets, that's, that's not considered in your line of work. But another thing is, don't mix cleaning products together. There's also some storage considerations as well, okay? Follow manufacturer's directions. Actually read the directions, because, you're the one who's gonna be using this, you're the one who's gonna be cleaning this and cleaning products. And some of those products are kind of harsh on the human skin and lungs and or eyes. So now to the second part of the presentation, which is, okay, I slipped up. Now I am in the realm of I got hurt. So cut management. You got cut. So the first thing you have to do is, of course, if you're dealing with your own wound, or if you're helping your colleague with a wound, is you gotta wash your hands, okay? Second, stop the bleeding. You apply direct pressure with a clean bandage, something clean, okay? And there should be first aid kits that have all of these things labeled. And again, before you go into the kitchen or before you start work, make sure you know where these kits are, and make sure you know all the parts in the kits. And one of those parts are these clean bandages that you can use to stop bleeding. And if the wound is like dirty and has things in it, you can rinse the wound in lukewarm tap water. Please do not use peroxide. It's an irritant, and it's just not advisable. It's just simple tap water, and then of course apply pressure and stop the bleeding. Now, the dressing is the clean material that you put directly on the wound. And my advice is, whatever is the first thing that you put on the wound, do not remove it. If it's clean, you put it down and you leave it down. And then if it's bleeding some more, you just put more on top of it. And the reason why you do that is there are platelets. There's these cells called platelets. And if you remove the original bandage, it will remove the platelets and the bleeding will start all over again. So let's say, for example, I got a pretty deep cut. I put down my bandage, right? It's still bleeding, and it's still bleeding through that initial bandage. Get another clean bandage, put it right on top of the original one. And then if the ambulance or getting to some care is taking a little bit longer, use, again, a clean dressing, which is part of your first aid kit. It's to wrap up the bandage and to keep it in place. And let's say, for example, it was, it's not that bad of a cut, but it was bleeding and you want to take care of it. Apply a brand new bandage every 24 hours. And again, rinse the wound again with lukewarm tap water. And if you can tolerate it a little, clean the edges with soap. That's for your lesser cuts. But if the bleeding is persistent, let's say I put 3 or 4 bandages already on top of it and it's still bleeding. And if you start noticing signs of inflammation, swelling, pain, fever, pus, and warmth in the area, get to medical care because, it's inflammation is already a signal that, the wound is getting infected, okay? So burns, say I got burned. The first thing you got to do is remove the person from the energy source. So for example, right, It goes, if they're burning in front of the hot water, get the hot water away from them. If they're burning in front of the stove, get the person away from the stove. If the burn area is small, then run cool water over the affected area. But if the burn area is, considerable, especially if it's their face, the majority of their chest and abdomen, and their groin area, that's something where you need to go to the hospital for. Okay, even if it's a relatively minor burn. And there are three kinds of burns. You have, well, there's actually four, but three typically that would most likely occur in a kitchen, which is first degree, second degree, third degree. First degree is, it looks kind of like a sunburn. There's some redness, maybe some swelling, and it hurts. Second degree, redness and swelling, the pain might be a little bit more, and it has blisters. And third degree, it's even worse. But the thing about the third degree burns, it is a full thickness burn, therefore the victim won't feel much. First and second degree, oh, they'll feel it, okay? So the thing you have to monitor for someone who got burned, even if it's a relatively small area, let's say their hand and their lower arm, if they faint due to the pain or due to the stress of it all, if their complexion starts becoming pale, okay, and if there's any effects to the patient's breathing or the person's breathing, call 911. It's the burn is a little bit more serious than initially assessed. Okay, so key items: move the person away from the energy source, cold water, right? Cover the area with a voice clean cloth to prevent infection. But if there's any fainting, pale complexion, or shallow breathing, those are signs of shock. And what does shock mean? It doesn't mean like you're shocked. Shock in the medical term means that for whatever reason, like for a burn, the burn was bad enough for your cardiovascular system to have a hard time getting oxygen to the rest of your body for whatever reason. And if you see fainting, pale complexion, or shallow breathing, please call 911. Electrocution management. When you see somebody who looks like they're getting electrocuted, do not touch the victim. Repeat, do not touch. I was with New York City EMS for 2 years. How many times I've had more than one victim because somebody else tried to remove the victim from the electrical source without removing the source. So if you see somebody getting electrocuted, it goes immediately what? Deal with whatever the source of the electrocution if you can. Now, the patient, if they're on the ground, whether they have loss of consciousness or not, do not move the victim. This also goes for any slips and falls. There could be a potential, like when they fell, or they could be getting another seizure, there could be another potential for a cervical spine damage or fracture, or a skull fracture, or any other bones. So do not touch the victim. Try to remove them from the electrical source by pulling out the plug, of course, of whatever is electrocuting them, if you can, right? Once the patient is secured, do not move the victim. And then, of course, begin CPR, if it calls for. But definitely call 911 if the patient starts going into a seizure. If the patient starts going into a seizure, do not put anything in their mouth. Just make sure that their head is protected and their body's protected from any furniture or any other people. So let everyone spread out and give the person room, and make sure to kind of protect their head and their body as they're having the seizure. Any LOC or loss of consciousness, or let's say they got zapped. If they don't know their name, okay, or don't know what time it is or who you are, and they knew you before they got zapped, call 911. That's a problem, and that's a neurologic. That's not good. And of course, any difficulty breathing. There may be also burns on both their feet and whatever touched the electrical device. So kind of be be on the lookout for that as well. But if you see any combination of this stuff, or if you of course had to begin CPR, then of course activate the 911 emergency system. Fall management, we mentioned earlier. Do not move them, especially their head and their neck. Stop any bleeding, if any, and watch for any changes of breathing and alertness. Kind of the same thing with electrocution. And of course, make note if there's vomiting or they're complaining of severe headache, again, confusion. They don't know what year it is, they don't know who you are, and they can't tell you their name immediately. That's sum up. Another slurred speech, of course, if they're trying to talk to you and they sound a little bit confused, and it's going to sound like they're drunk. Okay. Now this is even though Mayo Clinic wrote this in there, but if you do know how to check for pupils, that's called, well, you don't need to know what that's called. But if their pupils, like typically, if you look at somebody's pupils or the dark circles in the middle of their eye and they're unequal, one's really big and the other one's really small, that's not a good sign. Again, 911. So any of this stuff, right? Or any if they can't get up on their own, again, of course, call 911. And by the way, fall management is not necessarily like trauma related, like I slipped on some grease, or I bumped into somebody and then I hit my head. It also could be a neurologic problem. It also could be a cardiovascular problem. Maybe they had a fainting spell. So, but again, the best thing to do, keep the person still, right? And watch for any of these changes. And watch for like, a good 10, 15 minutes. But if they're okay and they can get up on their own volition, of course, do so. But I would have them wait in another room and then monitor for these kind of things. And if they're good in about a half hour or so, yeah. But if any combination of this, I'd be a little bit concerned. Poison management, again, not really one of the main topics according to our data in the first slide, but for completion. And you never know, you could actually ingested something, or a spray, or when you're cleaning something. I had a patient who she was cleaning her oven and didn't have enough ventilation, and she was found unconscious. So if they're drowsy or unconscious, any changes of breathing, if there are any changes of like their behavior, like restlessness, agitation, and of course seizures. These are your classic neurologic stuff. Of course, call 911. Oops. Now, what to do while you're waiting for an ambulance? Don't stick your finger in their mouth and to induce vomiting. Let's say, for example, they swallowed something they shouldn't have swallowed. Do not induce vomiting, because that may cause even more trouble if you vomit that that toxins back up. Again, remove any further exposure to chemicals. If it's in their eyes, do an eye flush for at least I forgot, it's like around 5 minutes or so. And of course, best thing, right? Fresh air. Get them out from the source. Get them away from the source. Get them someplace where they can breathe freely. Now, let's say your patient's already safe, or they went to the hospital and did all that. Here at Stratford University, I believe there's a form, but let's say you don't have a form. You could formally write an email to your teacher, or your direct reporting, your supervisor, or even the campus president as well. And make sure the incident report includes it, and it's done written formally, and make sure it has the date, time, and exact location of where the incident happened, what happened before, during, and after the incident, full names of patient and whoever were the witnesses and whoever helped the patient. Please, it is highly discouraged, and I should have put this on the slide before regarding management. Do not give anybody meds. Right? The victim or the patient has to get it either on their own, or what's even better, just call 911. And also it goes transporting a colleague or a student from the university to their home. Again, not a good idea for litigation purposes. And also, let's say you don't have real medical training and something happens along the way. So the best thing, when in doubt, call 911, call the ambulance, so at least the paramedics can come and assess. If they were taken to a hospital, if so, where, who, the name of the hospital, and of course, get that out to, whoever their emergency contact is, and submit this documentation as soon as possible, by the very next day, because, you might forget some things. And it's best to, to document early so that your memory is nice and good. So thank you, everybody, for with this brief brief presentation. And it is at this time where I would typically have a question and answer segment, and you could do that also with your host. There will be a post quiz that Chef Hathaway will have available. And upon completion and passing this post quiz, you will also get a certificate from Chef Hathaway stating that you went through this presentation. So that concludes my presentation, and thank you very much for inviting me.